After the establishment of the Ming dynasty, although it overthrew the rule of the Yuan dynasty, it inherited and strengthened the core gene of the Yuan dynasty's Keshig system, giving birth to secret service agencies such as the East Factory and the West Factory, and pushing the absolute monarchy with the master-servant political logic to a new height. First, the consistency of power source. The commanders of the East Factory and the West Factory were mostly eunuchs trusted by the emperor. Like the Keshig members, their power originated from the emperor's personal trust, not the formal bureaucratic system. They were directly subject to the emperor's orders and could exercise the power of investigation, arrest, and trial, bypassing the cabinet and the 6 ministries, becoming the personal law enforcement tool of the emperor. Second, the comprehensiveness of monitoring scope. Under the Keshig system, the words and deeds of ministers were all under monitoring. The Ming dynasty's factory guard system expanded this monitoring to all subjects, forming an omnipresent secret service network. VERITABLERECORDSOFT HEMINGDYNAST. Y records that the East Factory investigates treason, heresy, major evildoers, etc., and shares equal power with the embroidered uniform guard, which not only monitors ministers, but also investigates the daily remarks of ordinary people, realizing the comprehensive penetration of imperial power into society. Third, the extremization of the master-servant relationship. The relationship between the eunuchs of the Ming factory guard and the emperor was a purer master-servant relationship than that of the Yuan Keshig. The eunuchs had no children or family background and were completely dependent on the emperor, becoming the most loyal servants of the emperor. They acted according to the emperor's will, brutally suppressed dissidents, and even could dispose of ministers at will. As the history of the Ming dynasty criminal law records, the poison of the factory guards spread all over the world. Ministers were falsely accused, imprisoned and sentenced to death, and no one dared to defend themselves. This extreme master-servant relationship made the emperor's power reach the level of doing whatever one wants. Wu Han pointed out incisively in the biography of Zhu Yuanzhang, the Ming dynasty's factory guard system is a replica and strengthening of the Yuan dynasty's Keshig system. Their core is to realize the emperor's absolute control of the country through the personal servant group. This institutional design completely destroyed the bureaucratic political tradition formed since the Tang and Song dynasties. The inheritance from the Keshig to the factory guard is not only the inheritance of the institution, but also the inheritance of the master-servant political logic, taking the personal trust between the monarch and his servants as the core of power operation, and the formal bureaucratic system as a vassal of imperial power, which became the core feature of Chinese feudal absolute monarchy in the Ming and Qing dynasties. 7.3 The court flogging system, the institutionalization of slave characteristics and the complete dissolution of the scholar official's dignity. 3. 廷杖制度，奴隶色彩的制度化与士大夫尊严的彻底消解。If the politicalization of the master-servant ethic and the Keshig and factory guard systems are the power framework of absolute monarchy, then the normalization of the court flogging system in the Ming dynasty is the direct implantation of the slave characteristics in the master-servant relationship into political practice, which completely dissolves the personality dignity of the scholar officials and completes the final transformation from monarch and minister to master and servant. Although the court flogging system reached its peak in the Ming dynasty, its source can be traced back to the minister punishment tradition under the master-servant relationship in the Yuan dynasty, which is the direct continuation of the Mongol grassland political tradition in the Central Plains. Before the Yuan dynasty, the punishment of ministers in the Central Plains dynasties was mostly demotion, exile, and forced suicide. Although it was severe, it still retained the personality dignity of the scholar officials. As recorded in the history of the Tang dynasty criminal law records, scholar officials who commit crimes shall be punished with rank reduction or exile and shall not be subjected to corporal punishment to preserve the dignity of the scholar bureaucracy. However, the Yuan dynasty inherited the grassland master-servant tradition that the master can punish the servant at will, and there are many records of ministers being flogged for speaking out or offending the emperor. The history of the Yuan dynasty biography of Zhang Yanghao records that when Zhang Yanghao was the censor-in-chief, he was flogged in the court and demoted to the judge of the Pingyang Road General Administration. For impeaching the powerful. The history of the Yuan dynasty records of Emperor Chengzong also records that the minister Ahutai was flogged 70 times and dismissed from office for disobeying the imperial edict. This court flogging is not a statutory punishment, but a personal punishment of the emperor to the servant. Its purpose is not only to punish mistakes, but also to strengthen the servant consciousness of the ministers through physical humiliation. Chen Yuan pointed out in the Sinicization of Western regions peoples in the Yuan dynasty. The court flogging in the Yuan dynasty is not for punishing crimes, but for humiliating ministers to make clear the distinction between master and servant, so that the ministers know that they are the emperor's servants and dare not have the slightest resistance. The Ming dynasty pushed the Yuan dynasty's court flogging tradition to the extreme, making it a normalized political punishment means completely tearing off the disguise of monarch and minister co-governing the world and exposing the slave characteristics under the absolute monarchy. First, the expansion of punishment scope. The application scope of the Ming court flogging was far beyond that of the Yuan dynasty. It was not only aimed at ministers who disobeyed the imperial edict and committed crimes, but also at ministers who held different opinions and spoke out bluntly. In the 16th year of the Zhengde reign, Emperor Wuzong wanted to tour the south, and 146 ministers jointly remonstrated, all of whom were flogged in the court, and 11 were beaten to death on the spot. In the 3rd year of the Jiajing reign, during the Great Ritual Controversy, 134 ministers remonstrated, more than 180 were flogged in the court, and 17 were beaten to death. This large-scale court flogging is essentially the emperor suppressing different opinions and strengthening master-servant obedience through physical punishment. Second, the humiliation of the execution process. The execution process of the Ming court flogging was extremely humiliating. The minister was escorted to the Meridian Gate, stripped of his official uniform, exposed his buttocks, and executed by the imperial guards. All civil and military officials were required to attend the execution to watch. This way of being flogged with clothes off is not only physical pain, but also extreme spiritual humiliation, completely depriving the scholar, officials of their personality dignity. Veritable records of the Ming dynasty records that after the ministers were flogged, they were covered in blood and flesh, and in a state of distress, and some even became disabled for life. This humiliating punishment is the direct embodiment of the emperor's absolute control over the servant in the master-servant relationship. Third, the far-reaching political influence. The normalization of the court flogging system completely destroyed the independent spirit and moral integrity of the scholar officials. In the Middle and Late Ming dynasty, most ministers sought to protect themselves and dared not speak out bluntly to avoid being flogged, and even catered to the emperor intentionally, forming a political situation of all voices are silent. Huang Zongxi denounced in Waiting for the Dawn, the poor governance of the Ming dynasty began with Emperor Taizu abolishing the prime minister. The lack of good ministers in the Ming dynasty began with the rise of the court flogging system. The court flogging system not only dissolved the dignity of the scholar officials, but also led to political corruption and rigidity, becoming a concrete manifestation of the decline of the Ming dynasty's absolute monarchy. 8. Perspectives from Chinese and foreign academic circles. The dual evaluation of the Mongol piece's influence on Chinese civilization. 8. 中外学界的视野，蒙古和平对华夏文明影响的双重评价。The course of cultural integration and political transformation under the Mongol piece has not only attracted the attention of Chinese scholars, but also been interpreted by the International Sinological Circle from a world historical perspective. Chinese and foreign scholars such as Zhang Fan, Chen Yuan, Sugiyama Masaaki, and Zhong Kai Fairbank have all given dual evaluations to the influence of the Mongol piece on Chinese civilization. On the one hand, they affirm its important role in promoting Eurasian cultural integration, breaking the closeness of the Central Plains civilization and injecting new vitality into Chinese civilization. On the other hand, they also point out that its master-servant political tradition has fundamentally changed the development trajectory of Chinese traditional politics, leading to the extreme development of absolute monarchy in the Ming and Qing dynasties, and becoming an important factor restricting the modernization of Chinese civilization.